Don't look at me as if I were one of your properties, Adriel. No more. Celine's voice trembled, but not with fear. It was a fury contained for years, finally escaping between the marble walls of that kitchen where everything smelled of cold dinner and poisoned words. Adriel Monteclaro, standing in front of her with clenched fists and a tense jaw, felt those words pierce his chest like shards of broken glass. Properties, he repeated, with a bitter laugh that did not reach his eyes. I gave you everything, Celine, everything you didn't have. A home, security, a last name that meant something. She took a step back, her hand instinctively protecting her 6-month-old belly. Celine's dark eyes shone with tears she refused to shed in front of him. And you think that is love? You think you saved me? Adriel did not answer. He didn't know how. 5 years ago, Selene Ibarra was a 21-year-old young woman trapped in a world that was slowly crushing her. She worked cleaning offices at night, studied during the day, and slept in a shared room with 3 other women in a neighborhood where dreams went to die. Then he appeared. Adriel Monteclaro, 33 years old, founder of one of the largest real estate empires in the country. He saw her one night in the lobby of one of his corporate buildings. She was wearing a worn-out uniform, her hair gathered in a tight braid. He had just closed a $100 million deal. Their worlds should not have crossed, but Adriel stopped. He watched her as she cleaned the granite floor with precise movements, as if each gesture mattered. There was something about her posture, the way she kept her back straight despite the fatigue, that disarmed him. That same night, he offered her a better job. A week later, a dinner. A month later, he kissed her in the rain in front of her miserable apartment, and she cried because no one had ever looked at her like that. 6 months later, they got married. It was a private wedding, almost secret, without the press, without his partners, just a judge, 2 witnesses Adriel hired, and Celine wearing a simple white dress he had bought for her that same morning. She signed the papers with trembling hands, not fully understanding why a man like him wanted to legally tie himself to someone like her. Adriel never explained it. He simply said that she would be safe now, that no one would ever hurt her again, and he meant it. He gave her a mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by gardens that looked like they came from a European magazine. He gave her access to bank accounts she never touched because they made her feel ashamed. He gave her expensive clothes, jewels that felt cold against her skin, a car she drove alone because Adriel was always working. He gave her everything, except what she needed. He never told her that he loved her. He never asked her what she dreamed of. He never allowed her to be more than the woman he had rescued. Celine tried to adapt. She tried to be the perfect wife. She learned to walk in heels on marble floors, to smile at business dinners where other wives looked at her as if she were a sociological experiment. She tried to talk to Adriel about her days, about the things she read, about the possibility of studying art, something she had always wanted. He would listen to her, distracted, signing documents while she spoke. Then he would deposit more money into her account, as if that would bridge the gap growing between them until she became pregnant. It was an accident, or at least that's how Selena felt when she saw the 2 lines on the test. Adriel and she hardly touched each other anymore. He arrived late. He slept in his study when he had early meetings, and when they were together, the sex was intense but silent, as if they were both fulfilling a marital duty without daring to ask for more. But that night, 6 months and a week ago, something changed. Adriel had arrived devastated from a meeting. One of his main partners had betrayed him, leaking confidential information to the competition. Celine found him sitting on the floor of his office, his head in his hands. She knelt down in front of him, without saying a word, and simply hugged him. Adriel clung to her, as if she were the only real thing in his world of contracts and betrayals. That night, he looked at her in a different way, vulnerable and real. and for the first time in a long time, they felt truly connected. That night, he whispered her name against her skin, and she felt that she finally mattered. 3 weeks later, she found out she was carrying his son. When she told him, Adriel didn't smile, didn't hug her. She just felt as if she had just confirmed an important fact on a spreadsheet. He called the best obstetrician in the country, hired private nurses, forbade her from going out alone for security reasons, and turned the pregnancy into a project managed with corporate efficiency. Celine felt more alone than ever, and that night in the kitchen, after Adriel returned from a 5-day business trip without even asking how she was feeling, something inside Selena finally broke. She had prepared dinner. Nothing elaborate, just pasta with vegetables, something simple she could eat without her stomach bothering her. Adriel arrived past 11 at night, wearing a wrinkled suit and that expression of perpetual fatigue he hadn't shaken lately. He sat down at the table, checked his phone, ate 3 bites, and then said he had to review some contracts. "You're not even going to ask me how my week was," she said, her voice more controlled than she felt. Adriel looked up, surprised. "Did something happen?" "I'm 6 months pregnant, Adriel. Everything happens all the time." He shook his head. "If you need anything, tell me. I'll call the doctor tomorrow morning." "I don't need a doctor," Celine exploded, standing up. "I need a husband. I need you to look at me as if I were a person, not a problem to solve with money." Adriel got up too, with that defensive coldness he used in difficult negotiations. "You don't lack anything, Celine. You have everything any woman would want. Everything," she repeated with a broken laugh. "I have a gilded cage, Adriel. I have a man who bought me as if I were a charity project, and now expects me to be grateful for existing in his perfect world. I didn't buy you. You saved me," Celine corrected bitterly. "What's worse, because now I feel indebted just to breathe." The silence that followed was dense, toxic. Adriel clenched his jaw, a sign that he was holding back something he didn't know how to express. Selena knew him well enough to know that behind that cold mask were emotions he didn't understand himself, but she no longer had the strength to decipher them. "I don't know what else you want from me," Adriel said finally, his voice hoarse. Celine looked him in the eyes, and at that moment, she knew he really didn't know. He wasn't lying. He wasn't manipulating her. He simply didn't understand that love wasn't given in bank accounts or massive houses. And that truth destroyed her more than any insult could. "I want you to love me, Adriel, not keep me, not protect me. I want you to love me. But you don't know how, do you?" He didn't answer. Celine took the keys to the nurse's car. Adriel took a step toward her, something close to panic crossing his face for the first time. "Where are you going?" "I don't know. Far from here. Far from you. Celine, wait." But she was already walking toward the door. Adriel followed her, but stopped at the threshold, watching as she got into the car under the rain that had begun to fall hard. He should have run after her. He should have stopped her. He should have said something, anything other than his damn silent pride. But he didn't. Celine started the engine, tears already falling uncontrollably, mixing with the rain hitting the windshield. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. She couldn't continue being invisible in her own life. She accelerated down the empty road, visibility almost zero, her heart beating painfully against her ribs. She didn't see the curve in time. The car skidded. Celine turned the wheel, desperate, but the tires didn't respond. The impact was brutal. The sound of twisting metal, bursting glass, and then silence, a thick silence, broken only by the sound of rain falling on the wreckage. Adriel received the call 40 minutes later. When he arrived at the hospital, his hands were trembling. The doctors stopped him before he could enter the emergency room. They spoke to him with that professional softness used to deliver devastating news. Celine was stable. Minor wounds, contusions, severe emotional trauma. The baby did not survive. Adriel felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He asked to see her. The doctors hesitated, but finally let him in. Celine was sitting in the hospital bed, her eyes lost on the white wall in front of her. She had a bandage on her forehead, bruises on her arms. But what destroyed Adriel was the expression on her face. Empty, broken, absent. "Celine," he whispered, approaching slowly. She didn't move. Adriel reached out his hand to touch her, and then Celine reacted. She recoiled as if his touch burned. She looked at him directly for the first time, and in those dark eyes that once saw him with love, there was now only something resembling hatred. "Don't touch me," she said in a flat voice. Adriel dropped his hand. He wanted to say something. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness, but the words would not come out. They never came out. Celine looked at the wall again, and Adriel knew he had lost her. That night in the kitchen, when he let her go, he had lost everything. For the first 3 days after the accident, Adriel did not leave the hospital. He slept in an uncomfortable chair outside Celine's room, waiting for her to ask for him, to call him, to scream, to cry, to do anything except maintain that terrifying silence that was destroying him from the inside. But Celine said nothing. She talked to the doctors when necessary. She took her medication. She signed the papers. But when Adriel tried to enter the room, she simply closed her eyes and turned toward the wall. The doctors advised him to give her space and time, that the trauma was deep, and forcing contact would only make things worse. Adriel obeyed, though every minute of distance destroyed him a little more. On the 4th day, when he arrived at the hospital in the morning with coffee and breakfast, he knew she wouldn't touch. The room was empty, the sheets perfectly folded, no belongings, no note. Celine was gone. Adriel felt pure panic course through his veins. He ran to the nurse's station, demanding to know where his wife was. The nurse looked at him with something like pity and explained that Celine had requested a voluntary discharge that morning, and since she was physically stable, she was within her rights. "Where did she go?" Adriel asked in a broken voice. "We don't know, Mr. Monteclaro." She called a taxi and left. Adriel returned to the mansion, convinced he would find her there, that she must have returned home, that she just needed to be alone for a moment. But when he entered the house, it was exactly as they had left it that night. The cold dinner still on the table, the spare keys in the same place, everything intact, except for Celine's closet. Clothes were missing. Not much, just the essentials. A pair of jeans, some blouses, underwear, comfortable shoes. None of the expensive things he had bought her, none of the jewelry, nothing that screamed luxury or tied her to this life. A small suitcase was also missing, and her passport. Adriel looked in every corner of the house, desperate to find a clue, a note, something that would tell him where she had gone. He checked her phone. She had left it on the bedside table, turned off. He checked their joint bank accounts. No activity. She hadn't touched the money. It was as if Celine Ibarra had decided to vanish from the world Adriel had built for her, taking only what she had before she met him. Nothing. During the following weeks, Adriel hired the best private investigators. He gave them photos, descriptions, access to everything they needed. But Celine knew how to become invisible. She had lived in the shadows for years before meeting him. She knew how to move without leaving a trace. The investigators checked airports, bus stations, hotel records. Nothing. They questioned the few people she knew before the marriage. Old co-workers, acquaintances from her old neighborhood. No one had seen her. Or no one wanted to say so. Adriel stopped going to the office. His partners tried to contact him, worried about important negotiations that required his signature and attention. He ignored them. He spent his days locked in the mansion, walking through empty rooms that smelled of absence. He sat in the kitchen, staring at the exact spot where everything broke, replaying the conversation over and over in his mind. I want you to love me, Adriel, not keep me, not protect me. That you love me. Why did he never tell her he loved her? Why did he assume that giving her things was enough? Why did he think that rescuing her from a difficult life gave him the right to control every aspect of her existence? The questions pursued him, without answers, because the truth was simple and devastating. Adriel Monteclaro, a man who built an empire from scratch, who negotiated millions with calculated coldness, who never lost. He didn't know how to love. He didn't know how to surrender unconditionally. He didn't know how to be vulnerable. His father had taught him that love was weakness, that strong men protected, provided, and controlled, that emotions were for the weak. Adriel grew up believing that, built his entire life on that philosophy, and now he had lost everything that really mattered. In the third month of the search, one of the investigators brought a clue. Someone matching Seleni's description had been seen in a small coastal city 6 hours away. She was working in a local cafe. Adriel drove all night, his heart beating violently, rehearsing what he would say when he found her. But when he arrived, the woman behind the counter was not Selene. She only vaguely resembled her. The investigator apologized. Adriel returned to his ruined mansion. 6 months after the accident, Adriel finally accepted the truth. Selene didn't want to be found. And maybe, he thought in his darkest moments, she was right to disappear. He tried to return to normalcy. He returned to the office, although every decision seemed empty, meaningless. His partners noticed the change. The man who used to be relentless in negotiations now seemed distracted, absent. He lost 2 important contracts because he simply didn't care to fight for them. One night, his assistant brought him a pile of documents to sign. Among them was an envelope Adriel didn't recognize. He opened it with trembling hands. They were divorce papers. Selene had sent them through a lawyer in another city. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't claim half of his assets, which she had a legal right to. She didn't ask for compensation. She just wanted the legal freedom to never be tied to him again. Adriel read every line, feeling as if something inside him was finally snapping. She had included a contact address for him to send the signed papers. It was a P.O. box in a city Adriel had never visited. No real clue as to where she was. He signed the papers that same night. With trembling hands and tears he didn't know he could cry. He sent them the next day. 2 weeks later, he received the legal confirmation. The divorce was finalized. Selene Ibarra was no longer his wife. Adriel kept a copy of the divorce certificate in his office drawer, along with the only photo he had of her. It was from their wedding. Selene was smiling shyly at the camera in that simple white dress, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. She looked beautiful. She looked hopeful. Adriel wasn't even looking at the camera in that photo. He was looking at her, and yet he never told her how he felt. In the first year without Selene, Adriel became a ghost of himself. He worked because it was the only thing he knew, but he no longer felt the ambition that used to drive him. His friends, the few he had, tried to get him out, to introduce him to women, to distract him, but Adriel rejected every invitation. He didn't want anyone else. He couldn't even imagine touching another person. At night, when the mansion became too quiet, Adriel would walk into the room he was going to make for the baby. He had started decorating it weeks after Selene told him she was pregnant. He had hired designers, bought the most expensive crib, and filled the space with perfect things for a son he never met. Now, it was just a mausoleum for what could have been. He sat on the floor of that room, with his back against the wall, and let the pain wash over him. He didn't try to run away from it. He didn't bury it in work or alcohol. He just felt it, everything, until he couldn't breathe. And in those moments, he understood. He understood that Selene was right, that he hadn't loved her the way she needed, that he had imprisoned her in a beautiful but empty life, that he never asked her what she wanted, what she dreamed, who she wanted to be. He only gave her what he thought she needed, and that wasn't love. It was possession disguised as protection. In the second year without her, Adriel changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly he began to dismantle the walls he had built all his life. He began therapy, something he had previously considered unnecessary and weak. He spoke about his father, about growing up believing that men couldn't break. He spoke about Celine, about how he met her, about the night of the accident. His therapist asked him once, "What would you do if you found her today?" Adriel thought for a long time before answering. "I would tell her that I'm sorry, that she was right, that I never knew how to love her, but that now I understand what I lost, and that if she gave me a second chance, I would spend the rest of my life showing her that I can be the man she deserved from the beginning. And if she doesn't forgive you, then," Adriel said in a broken voice, "I would let her go. Because loving her for real means wanting her to be happy, even if she's not with me." 3 years had passed since the night everything broke. Adriel continued to live in the mansion, although he had sold many of the properties he no longer needed. He donated a large part of his fortune to organizations that helped women in difficult situations, women like Celine had been. He didn't do it to redeem himself. He did it because he finally understood the privilege he had wasted. He no longer actively sought Celine. The investigators had stopped reporting months ago, but he never stopped thinking about her. In every city he visited for work, he looked at the faces on the streets, waiting for a miracle he knew would not come. Until one day, it did. Adriel was in Barcelona for a real estate investment conference. He hadn't wanted to go, but his partners insisted. On the night of the inauguration, he decided to escape the hotel and walk the streets of the Gothic Quarter, needing air, space, and silence. He passed in front of a small art gallery. Normally, he wouldn't have stopped, but something in one of the paintings displayed in the window made him stop dead. It was an oil painting of a kitchen, modern with marble walls, and in the center, a female figure with her back turned, looking toward an open door where rain was falling. Adriel knew that kitchen. He knew that scene. He entered the gallery, his heart racing. There were more paintings, all signed with the initials S.I., all telling fragments of a story he knew intimately. An empty hospital, a suitcase on a bed, a white dress hanging in an empty closet, a crib unused. And then he saw her, at the back of the gallery, talking to a curator. Celine, but not the Celine he remembered. This woman had shorter hair. She wore clothes that reflected her personality, not her bank account. She moved with confidence, with freedom. She was genuinely laughing with someone. She was radiant. She was alive in a way she had never been before. And next to her, holding her hand, was a little boy, no more than 2 years old, with dark, curly hair and eyes Adriel recognized because he saw them every morning in the mirror. The world stopped. Celine looked up, and their eyes met through the crowd. The color drained from her face. The boy asked something, tugging at her hand, and Adriel knew, at that moment, that everything was about to change again. But before continuing with what happened in that reunion, I want to take a break. Beautiful. Yes, I am talking to you. You are listening to me right now. I wonder where you are right now. Maybe driving to work, cooking dinner, lying in your bed before going to sleep. Wherever you are, I want you to know that your company means a lot to me. If this story is touching your heart, if you feel something that Celine and Adriel are experiencing, leave me a comment below. Tell me which part of the world you're listening from. Tell me what you think of this story. And if you haven't liked it yet, this is the perfect time to do it. I read every comment. I answer each one, because I create these stories for you, and your voice matters. Now let's go back to Barcelona, to that art gallery, where 2 worlds that were destroyed are about to collide again. Celine felt the air leave her lungs when her eyes met Adriel's through the gallery. 3 years. 3 years, rebuilding, healing, learning to breathe without the weight of that marriage on her shoulders. 3 years convincing herself that she would never see him again. And now he was there, standing among the paintings she had created, as therapy, as exorcism, as a way to release everything she could never tell him. The boy next to her, Matteo, tugged his hand more insistently. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Her son's voice snapped her out of the trance. Selene broke eye contact with Adriel and crouched down to Matteo's level, forcing a smile she hoped looked natural. "I'll get you some water now, my love. Stay with Ms. Carla for a moment, okay?" The curator, an older woman who had been Selene's mentor since she arrived in Barcelona, noticed the immediate tension in the young woman's body. Carla looked where Selena had been looking and saw the tall man, dressed in an impeccable suit, advancing through the crowd with measured but determined steps. "Are you okay?" Carla whispered. Selene nodded, although everything in her screamed that no, nothing was okay. She stood up. She took Matteo's hand and guided him quickly toward the small office at the back of the gallery. Her maternal instinct was clear. Keep her son away from this confrontation before Adriel reached them. But she wasn't fast enough. Selene. Adriel's voice reached her just before she crossed the office door. She stopped, her back tense, without turning around. Matteo looked at her, confused, sensing the tension in his mother's hand. "Please," Adriel continued, his voice softer than she remembered. "I just want to talk to you." Selene closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. Then she turned slowly, instinctively placing herself between Adriel and Matteo. When she finally looked him in the face, the impact was physical. He looked different, older, yes, but not just because of the 3 years. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a deep sadness, a vulnerability that the Adriel she knew would never have allowed to show. "We have nothing to talk about," she said, keeping her voice firm despite her internal trembling. Adriel's eyes then went down to Matteo, who clung to his mother's leg, observing the stranger with childish curiosity. Selene saw the exact moment Adriel understood. She saw his pupils dilate, his breathing stop, his face go pale. Adriel was not stupid. The child's features were unmistakable. The dark hair with those rebellious waves he himself had, the shape of the jaw, those honey-colored eyes that were exactly like the ones that looked back at him every morning in the mirror. "How old is he?" Adriel asked, his voice barely audible. "It's not your concern." "Selene, please." "No," she interrupted with more force. "You have no right. Not after 3 years. Not after everything." Matteo, feeling uncomfortable with the tension, hid his face against Selena's leg. She immediately changed her demeanor, softening her expression and caressing her son's hair tenderly. "Carla, could you take Matteo to get some water and give him the cookies I brought?" Selena asked. The older woman nodded, understanding the urgency. She reached out her hand to the child with a warm smile. Matteo hesitated, looking to his mother for approval. Selene bent down again and kissed his forehead. "Go with Miss Carla, my dear. Mommy just needs to talk to this gentleman for a moment." "Is he a friend of yours?" Matteo asked, in that devastatingly innocent voice of a child. Selene swallowed hard. She didn't know how to answer. It was Adriel who spoke, his voice breaking slightly. "Yes," he said, although his eyes never stopped looking at Selene. "We were very close friends a long time ago." Matteo seemed satisfied with that answer, and finally let Carla lead him to the small kitchen in the gallery. As soon as he disappeared from sight, Selene's mask of calm broke. She leaned against the wall, needing physical support. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "There's an investment conference," Adriel answered automatically, although he knew that wasn't what she was really asking. "I saw your paintings from outside. I recognized the kitchen." Selene laughed bitterly. "Of course you recognized it." The silence between them was dense, heavy with 3 years of absence, and a question that floated in the air without being spoken. Finally, Adriel asked, "Is he my son?" Celine looked him directly in the eyes, and for a moment considered lying. It would have been easier to tell him no, that she had rebuilt her life, that Matteo belonged to someone else. But she had never been good at lying, and something in Adriel's shattered expression stopped her. "Yes," she finally admitted. "He is your son." Adriel closed his eyes, as if those words were a physical blow. When he opened them again, there were tears he refused to let fall. "When did you know?" 2 weeks after I left the hospital," Celine answered with a trembling voice. "I thought everything had ended that night. The accident, the baby, everything. But then I started to feel sick again. I went to a doctor. He told me I had been pregnant with twins. One did not survive, but the other did. Matteo survived." The revelation hit Adriel like a tsunami. Twins. She had been expecting twins, and he never knew. They had lost one, but the other survived, hidden, clinging to life inside her while the world was crumbling. "Why didn't you tell me?" Adriel asked in a broken voice. "Why didn't you look for me?" Celine looked at him with a mixture of pain and something like anger. "Why would I have done that, Adriel? To be your charity project again? To be locked in a gilded cage again, but now with a baby as an excuse to control me more? So that my son would grow up watching his father treat me like a possession instead of a person? I never wanted to control you." "Seriously?" Celine replied bitterly. "Then why did every decision I made have to go through you? Why couldn't I leave the house alone without you hiring bodyguards? Why, when I told you I wanted to study art, did you deposit money into my account instead of asking me which university I wanted to enroll in?" Adriel had no answer, because she was right. On every point, she was right. "I changed," he finally said in a barely audible voice. Celine laughed without humor. "Everyone changes, Adriel. Time does that. But I couldn't wait for you to decide to become an emotional human being. I had to save myself. I had to save my son." "Our son," Adriel corrected, more urgently than he intended. "My son," Celine said firmly. "I carried him in my womb while I was running away from you. I was alone in a cheap hospital room when he was born, with no one to hold my hand. I've woken up every night for 2 years to feed him, calm him down, take care of him. I gave up everything to give him a life where he was loved, not just provided for." The words were like knives, but Adriel accepted them. He deserved them, every single one. "You're right," he admitted, surprising Celine. "In everything. I was selfish, controlling, unable to love you the way you deserved. And I lost everything because of it. But that boy," he continued, gesturing toward where Matteo had disappeared. "He's my son, too. And even if I understand why you hid it from me, even if I accept that you were right, I can't just walk away now that I know he exists." Celine felt tears finally escape her eyes. She had feared this moment for 3 years. She had rehearsed it in her mind 1,000 times, but nothing prepared her for the reality of having Adriel in front of her, looking at her with that mixture of regret and despair. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered. "I know," Adriel replied, "and I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to let me get to know him, to let me prove to you that I can be better, that I've learned." "What exactly did you learn?" Celine asked, needing to hear it. Adriel took a step closer, but without invading her space, respecting the distance she needed. "I learned that love is not control, that protecting someone doesn't mean deciding for them, that being strong doesn't mean not breaking. I learned," he said in a broken voice, "that losing you was the best and the worst thing that ever happened to me, because it destroyed me. But it also forced me to rebuild myself into someone who might, someday, deserve you." Celine closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely now. Part of her, the part that never stopped loving him despite everything, wanted to believe him, wanted to give him a chance. But the part that had suffered, that had fled under the rain, that had lost a baby and had had to rebuild her life from scratch, that part could not take such a risk so easily. "I can't make this decision now," she finally said. "Not like this. Not here." "It's okay," Adriel accepted immediately. "Take all the time you need. But I need you to understand something," Celine continued, looking at him directly. "If you decide to be part of Matteo's life, you can't disappear. You can't come and go whenever you want. He's a child, not a project, not a negotiation. If you're going to be there, you have to be there completely. I understand that. And I'm not going back to you," added Celine, needing to be clear. "It doesn't matter what happens. Matteo may have a father, but what we were ended 3 years ago in that kitchen." The words were a direct blow to Adriel's heart, but he nodded, because deep down, he knew he had no right to expect anything else. Not yet. Maybe never. "I just want an opportunity to meet him," he said softly. "To be his father, if you'll let me." Celine took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the most important decision she had made in years. She looked at the kitchen door, where Matteo was with Carla, probably eating cookies and asking his 1,000 questions like any curious child. She thought of all the times Matteo asked why he didn't have a father like the other kids at school, and all the sweet lies she had invented to protect him. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe, just maybe, Adriel really had changed. Or maybe she was making the biggest mistake of her life for the second time. "You can meet him," Celine finally said, her voice firm despite her fear. "But on my terms, and at my pace. If at any moment I feel that you are hurting him, emotionally or in any other way, you disappear from our lives. Understood?" "Understood," Adriel accepted, with a mixture of relief and terror in his expression. Celine sighed, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing. But for the first time in 3 years, Adriel wasn't making the decision for her. This time, she was in control. And that, she thought, had to mean something. The first encounters between Adriel and Matteo were clumsy, full of uncomfortable silences and cautious looks. Celine insisted they meet in public, neutral places, parks, cafes, museums, places where she could observe every interaction, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Adriel accepted every condition without protest. The first day, they met in a park near Celine's apartment. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and Matteo was running between the swings with the overflowing energy of a 2-year-old. Adriel arrived 15 minutes early, waiting on a bench with sweaty hands and a racing heart, as if it were a life-or-death negotiation. When he saw Celine approaching with Matteo by the hand, something inside him broke and mended at the same time. His son. That boy was his son, and for 2 years he hadn't known he existed. "Matteo," said Celine gently, kneeling next to the boy. "Do you remember the man we saw at the gallery? This is Adriel, and he's going to spend some time with us today." The boy observed him with curiosity, without fear, but without any particular emotion either. To Matteo, Adriel was just a stranger his mother had decided to meet. "Hello, Matteo," said Adriel, trying to make his voice sound natural despite the lump in his throat. "I'm very happy to see you again. Do you have toys?" Matteo asked directly, with the brutal honesty of small children. Adriel blinked, unprepared. He hadn't thought to bring anything. Celine noticed his hesitation, and something in her expression softened slightly, as if that clumsiness were a good sign. "Adriel didn't know we were coming to the park today," Celine explained. "But next time, I'm sure he'll bring something, won't he?" Adriel nodded quickly. "Yes, next time I'll bring something. What do you like?" Matteo lit up immediately. Dinosaurs, and cars, and books with pictures. The conversation flowed simply after that, guided by Matteo's innocence and Céline's vigilant presence. Adriel listened more than he spoke, learning small things about his son. That he liked chocolate, but not strawberries. That he could count to 15. That his favorite color was blue. That he was afraid of big dogs, but not small ones. Details a father should know. Details he had lost because of his own fault. When Matteo ran toward the swings, Céline and Adriel remained on the bench, watching him in silence. Finally, she spoke. "Don't expect him to call you Dad," she said firmly, but not cruelly. "Not yet. Maybe never." "It's up to you." "I know," Adriel replied. "I won't force anything." "Good." The silence stretched between them, but this time it was different from that night in the kitchen. Less hostile, more weary. "You have a life here," Adriel finally observed, watching Selena follow Matteo's every move with her eyes. "A good life. Yes," she confirmed. "It was hard for me to build it, but yes." "Do you paint for a living?" Celine nodded. "I sell some pieces. It hasn't made me rich, but it's enough. And I teach art classes to children twice a week. I like it. It makes me feel useful." Adriel noticed how she used that word. Useful. As if during her marriage she hadn't felt that way, and she probably hadn't. He had never allowed her to contribute anything, believing that providing was enough. "I'm glad you found this," he said sincerely. "That you found who you are." Celine looked at him with bewilderment, surprised by the genuine tone in his voice. "And you?" she asked. "Did you find anything in these 3 years?" Adriel took a long time to answer. "I lost a lot," he finally said. "Business deals, friendships that turned out to be only contacts of convenience. But I also gained something, therapy, silence. Time to think about who I was and who I want to be." "And who do you want to be?" Adriel looked at her directly. "Someone who deserves to be in that child's life. And if possible, one day, in yours again." Celine looked away, uncomfortable. "I already told you we're not going back." "I know," Adriel accepted. "But that doesn't mean I can't try to be worthy of your forgiveness. I don't need you to be worthy of anything, Adriel. I just need you to be a good father to Matteo, that's all." "Then that's what I will be," he promised. The following meetings were easier. Adriel brought the dinosaurs Matteo had asked for, and the boy spent the whole afternoon showing him each one, explaining with childish seriousness which was a carnivore and which was a herbivore. Adriel listened to every word as if it were the most important thing in the world. One afternoon, Matteo asked if Adriel could go with them to the beach over the weekend. Celine hesitated, but she saw the hope in her son's eyes and didn't have the heart to refuse. That Saturday, the 3 of them went to a small hidden cove Celine used to visit. Matteo ran toward the waves with shouts of excitement. Adriel took off his shoes and rolled up his pants, something Selena had never seen him do. The Adriel she used to know would never have allowed himself to look disheveled, hair blown by the wind, sand on his clothes. But this Adriel knelt on the shore, helping Matteo build a sandcastle that would inevitably be destroyed by the waves. And when the child laughed, free and happy, Adriel laughed too. And Celine felt something dangerous awakening in her chest. It wasn't love, it couldn't be. But it was something. One night, 2 months after that first meeting in the park, Celine received an emergency call. Matteo had developed a sudden high fever. Carla, her mentor, was on a trip, and there was no one else she could call. Her hands trembled as she dialed Adriel's number, hating herself for doing it, but left with no other choice. He arrived in less than 20 minutes. No questions, no complaints. He just showed up with his car waiting downstairs and took them to the nearest hospital. Matteo cried in Selene's arms, scared by the fever and discomfort. Adriel drove with steady hands, but a pale face of concern. In the emergency room, while they waited for their turn, Matteo reached his arms out toward Adriel. It was instinctive, the gesture of a child seeking comfort. Selene saw Adriel freeze for a second, surprised, before taking the child carefully, as if he were the most fragile thing in the world. Matteo curled up against Adriel's chest, and the powerful man who once controlled empires broke down silently, embracing his son, with tears falling soundlessly. Selene looked away, feeling her own throat tighten. It turned out to be only a viral infection, nothing severe. The doctor prescribed medication and rest. When they returned to Celine's apartment, it was already past midnight. Matteo had fallen asleep in the car, exhausted. Adriel carried him carefully, following Selene to the child's small bedroom. It was so different from the room he had designed in the mansion. It was small, with walls hand-painted by Selene, shelves full of used books and modest toys. But it was full of love. It was evident in every detail. Adriel laid Matteo on the bed, pulling the sheets over him. He stayed there for a moment, simply watching him sleep. "Thank you," said Selene in a low voice from the doorway, "for coming so quickly." Adriel turned to her. "I will always come if you need me, for whatever reason." Selene sighed, not knowing what else to say. They left the room, leaving the door ajar. In the small living room, the tension between them was different. Softer, more vulnerable. "Do you want coffee?" Selene offered. "Please." While she was preparing the coffee, Adriel observed the apartment. It was cozy, filled with Selene's art and photos of Matteo at different stages. There was a life here, a life she had built without him. "Why did you do it?" Selene suddenly asked, handing him a cup. "Why did you really come tonight?" Adriel looked at her, confused. "Because you called me." "No," she insisted. "You could have sent a driver. You could have paid the best doctor to go to my house." That is what the old Adriel would have done. The old Adriel, he repeated sadly, would have thought that money solved everything. But I learned that being present is worth more than anything you can buy. Selene studied him in silence, searching for signs of falsehood or manipulation, but she only found sincerity. "It scares me," she finally admitted. "What scares you?" "That you are really changing. Because if it's real, it means that maybe, just maybe, I could have had this before. That we lost 3 years for nothing." Adriel slowly approached, giving her space to back away if she wanted. She didn't. "We didn't lose 3 years for nothing," he said softly. "We lost them because I was unable to be what you needed, and you needed to leave to save yourself. That's not nothing, Selene. That's survival." The tears Selene had held back all night finally escaped. Adriel slowly raised his hand, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The contact was electric. Selene took a step back, startled by her own reaction. "I can't do this again." "I'm not asking you to," Adriel assured her. "I'm just telling you that if you ever decide you can, I'll be here, waiting, without pressure." Selene looked him in the eye and saw the truth there. She saw the man he could have been if he had learned to love without possessing. And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed a small part of her heart to consider the possibility. Maybe not now, maybe not soon, but maybe someday. 6 months after that night at the hospital, Selene's life had found a strange but functional rhythm. Adriel was now a constant presence, not invasive, but reliable. He picked up Matteo twice a week to spend the afternoon together. He showed up at the birthdays of Matteo's friends, without Selene having to ask him. He sent messages asking how they were, without expecting anything in return. Matteo had begun to call him Daddy. The first time it happened, it was casual. The 3 of them were at the zoo together, because Matteo had insisted they both go. The boy pointed at an elephant and shouted with excitement, "Daddy, look! It's huge!" Adriel had frozen, his eyes shining with emotion. Celine felt her heart squeeze, a mix of happiness for her son and fear of what it meant. That night, after putting Matteo to bed, Celine and Adriel sat on the small terrace of the apartment. It had become a tacit custom, those stolen moments after the boy was asleep, where they talked about simple things, about the day, about Matteo, about everything except themselves. But that night, Adriel broke the comfortable silence. "I want you to know that I didn't ask him to call me that," he said softly. "If you prefer that he doesn't do it yet, I can talk to him." Celine shook her head. "No, he decided on his own, and he has the right to have you as his father if you are truly willing to be one." "I am," Adriel said without hesitation. "And I always will be." The silence that followed was heavy. Celine played with the teacup in her hands, searching for the right words for something she had been considering for weeks. "My art exhibition is in 2 months, she finally said. "It's important to me. The largest gallery in Barcelona is going to exhibit my work." Adriel smiled, genuinely. "That's incredible, Celine. You deserve it." "I want you to come," she continued, looking at him directly. "Not as Matteo's father, but as someone who was part of the story told by those paintings." Adriel felt the air leave his lungs. "Are you sure?" "No," Celine admitted honestly. "But I think it's time to stop running away from what we were, so we can understand what we can become." The following weeks passed quickly. Adriel had to travel for work, something that before would have kept him away for months. But now he called every night to talk to Matteo. He asked for video calls where the child showed him his drawings for the day, told him about his swimming class, and asked him to come back soon. And after Matteo said goodbye, Adriel stayed on the line. Selene didn't hang up immediately. They talked about nothing, about everything, about the little things that allow two people to truly know each other. Celine discovered that Adriel had started working with non-profit organizations, investing in housing projects for low-income families, that he had sold the mansion because he couldn't live there without them, that he still attended therapy twice a week, working to be a better man. Adriel discovered that Celine had occasional nightmares about the accident, that her favorite color was sea green because it reminded her of freedom, and that she hummed softly when she painted without realizing it. They were getting to know each other in a way they never had during their marriage, without roles, without expectations, just two people trying to heal. The night of the exhibition arrived with a mix of nerves and hope. Celine had chosen 12 paintings to exhibit. They all told the story of her marriage, her loss, and her rebirth. They were raw, honest, and painful. Adriel arrived early, before the event began. Celine watched him enter the empty gallery, walking slowly in front of each piece. She observed from a distance how he stopped in front of the kitchen painting, how his shoulders tensed in front of the hospital one, and how he touched the frame of the painting showing a lonely suitcase on a bed. When he reached the last painting, which Celine had finished just a week before, he stood perfectly still. It was different from the others. The other 11 were in dark tones, deep grays and blues. But this one was luminous. It showed a beach at dawn, with two figures barely defined on the shore. They weren't touching, but they weren't completely apart. And between them, a little boy played with the waves. It was titled, Maybe. Adriel felt tears rolling down his cheeks, without shame. Celine slowly approached, standing next to him in front of the work. "I don't know if we're going to be who we were again," she said in a low voice. "Honestly, I don't think we should. Those people were broken in ways they couldn't heal." "I know," replied Adriel, without looking away from the painting. "But maybe," Celine continued, "we can be something new, something better, something built on honesty instead of control, on trust instead of debt." Adriel turned to her, and in his eyes was a vulnerability she had never seen in the man she married. "I don't deserve you," he said in a broken voice. "Maybe I never will. But if you give me a chance, I'll spend the rest of my life trying." Celine felt tears filling her own eyes. "I don't need you to deserve me. I need you to choose me every day. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because you truly want to be here." "I choose you," he said immediately. "Every day, every moment, I choose you and our son. And I will continue choosing you, even if you decide not to choose me." The exhibition began shortly after. The gallery was filled with people, critics, and potential buyers. Celine smiled, talked about her work, and accepted congratulations. But her eyes were constantly searching for Adriel in the crowd. He was in a corner, with Matteo in his arms. The boy had grown tired of the event and had curled up against his father's shoulder, half asleep. Adriel held him naturally now, without the initial clumsiness. He whispered into his ear, probably telling him stories to keep him calm. At that moment, seeing that powerful man reduced to softness out of love for his son, Selene knew. She knew that the Adriel Monteclaro she had married had died the same night she fled into the rain, and that the man in front of her now was someone who had been reborn from pain, just like her. When the exhibition ended and the last guests left, Carla offered to take Matteo to sleep at her house so that Selene could celebrate peacefully. The boy said goodbye to both with sleepy kisses and left with his honorary grandmother without protest. Celine and Adriel were left alone in the empty gallery, surrounded by the paintings that told their story. "You sold 8, Adriel observed, pointing to the sold labels on several works. Celine nodded, still processing the success of the night. "Yes, including the kitchen." "Who bought it?" "You did," replied the gallery owner, appearing from the office with papers in hand. "Mr. Monteclaro made an offer before the exhibition even began. Quite a generous one, by the way." Celine turned to Adriel, surprised. "You bought the painting? And the hospital one? And the suitcase one?" "I did," he admitted without hesitation. "And this one," he added. "Maybe, if you'll sell it to me." "Adriel, you can't buy my whole exhibition." "I'm not buying your exhibition," he corrected. "I'm buying our story. Because it's mine too. And because I want to remember where we came from, so I never forget where I don't want to go back." Celine looked at him, and for the first time in 4 years, she didn't see the man who saved her from a difficult life only to lock her in another gilded prison. She saw the man who had completely broken and had chosen to rebuild himself into someone better. She saw the father her son deserved, and maybe, just maybe, she saw the man she could love again. "I'm not going to promise you it will be easy," Celine finally said. "I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to doubt. I'm going to need time." "All the time you need," Adriel promised. "And I need you to understand that if we try this again, it's not going to be like before. I'm not going to be the wife who stays quiet. I'm not going to give up my work, my life, or my identity." "I don't want you to," he assured her. "I want the woman you are now, strong, independent, complete." "And if it doesn't work," Celine continued, needing it to be clear, "we can't destroy each other again. Not in front of Matteo." "If it doesn't work," Adriel agreed, "we will continue being the parents he needs. But I'm going to do everything to make it work, Celine. Everything." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the most important decision of her life. She could say no. She could keep things as they were, safe, controlled. Or she could take a leap of faith, risk breaking again, and hope that this time it would be different. She looked at the paintings around her, her story in oil and pain. And then she looked at the man in front of her, his eyes filled with equal parts hope and fear. "Okay," she finally whispered. "Let's try, slowly. But let's try." Adriel closed his eyes, letting out a sigh that seemed to have lasted 3 years. When he opened them, There were tears of relief falling without shame. "Thank you," he said in a broken voice. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Celine took a step forward, closing the distance between them. She raised her hand, hesitating for a moment before touching his cheek, wiping a tear with her thumb, the same gesture he had made months ago. "Don't thank me yet," she said with a small smile. "Prove it to me." And then, for the first time in 3 years, Adriel Monteclaro kissed Selena Ibarra. It was not like the kisses of the past, full of possession and desperate need. It was soft, tentative, full of unstated promises and fragile hope. It was the kiss of two people who had died and been reborn, who had lost everything and were learning to rebuild. It was the first kiss of their second chance. And when they parted, their faces touching and their breaths intertwined, they both knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would be moments of doubt, of fear, of old wounds reopening. But there would also be moments of laughter, of mornings watching Matteo grow, of honest conversations, of love built on a real foundation, not on fantasies of rescue and gratitude. 3 months later, Adriel still hadn't moved back in with them, but he had a toothbrush in Selena's bathroom, a drawer of clothes in her room, and a place at the breakfast table. Matteo had 2 homes now, and he felt loved in both. Selena had sold enough paintings to open her own little studio. Adriel had helped her with the legal paperwork, but she never let him pay for anything. She had learned that she needed to build things for herself. And at night, when Matteo was sleeping, and they were sitting on the terrace looking out at the city, Adriel would take Selene's hand, and she no longer pulled away. They were healing, together, but separate, learning to love each other without losing themselves. And in those moments, with the stars over Barcelona shining softly, Celine understood that true love wasn't what saved you. It was what allowed you to save yourself. And then she chose to stay.